Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings to everyone. Welcome to another episode of at my Sister's House podcast featuring chapters and culture, where we'll look at our stories from our literature by our authors in our own voice. I'm your host, Fatimah Muhammad. If this is what you are interested in, topics where we will discuss the struggles, the fights, the victories, the historical accounts, as well as the present day stories of those who dare to write the stories that reflect our lives, our history, and who and what we are. I ask you to subscribe, to join, to like, join our community, be a part of the At My Sister's House family. Welcome again to At My Sister's House Chapters and Culture. I'm grabbing my coffee.
Chapters and culture. They try to chain our hands, but couldn't bind the mind. We rode in shadow, left our wisdom for the blind. Pages turned to silence, but the message was loud. Ink is our resistance. Our ancestors proud, chapters in culture, chapters in culture. We carry their stories, we speak with their fire. Each word a revolution, each book lifts us higher. Truth in every chapter, power in the pen.
This cup is also available on the At My Sister's House website.
Chapters in culture. This is our time, this is our fight. From the roots to the skies, we build with words, we shine with light. Chapters in culture.
So, again, brothers and sisters, I welcome you back to another episode of Chapters and Culture. This is our second episode, number 2. And last week we looked at some of the historical accounts. We looked at laws that were written just to make sure the black man and woman wouldn't get the light of knowledge, to get the light of understanding, to have the power to read and to write, because we understand that knowledge is power. It is, you cannot enslave a man who understands his true value. So that knowledge had to be kept from us. So to make sure that we didn't receive that knowledge, they made sure that the books, the writings, were never given to us. And if they gave them to us like they did with the Bible, they gave it to us in a way that it only fed their objective, which is to keep us enslaved. It was never to really tell our story. So again, I welcome you to share. Please comment. If you have stories, if you know of authors, if you know of books that is in alignment with what we're talking about, please make the comment, list some authors and some titles below, and we'll definitely explore and go into it deeply. Again, my name is Fatimah Muhammad, and I am your host here, and I welcome you to our house. Now, this week, I want to look at the women's voices, the black woman's voice in telling our story. Now, we're going to look at it from many perspectives, right? And I want us to keep in mind when sharing the story of the black woman, this even goes deeper. Because, again, as the black man will tell you what's going on from his perspective, the male perspective, from the feminine's perspective, we're looking at it from the ones who carry the children, the next generations in her womb. This is a whole nother perspective. There's the perspective from the male and the perspective from the female, and the stories told. Because not only were we again facing racism just like the black man, we were of course facing classism. But there's that sexism that was also prevalent amongst the black woman. And there's a whole story in that. So these are women who fought the sexist um, classes, the sexism that was prevalent, that was designed on top of the racism to keep us under. Now, one of the other things I want to look at when we look at these stories, especially from the historical, there's also the sexual abuse aspect that has to be a factor in this. So, as we discussed in episode 1, we're talking about men and women, and today we'll be focused on the woman, but men and women who put their lives on the line to make sure that they could read, write, and tell their story. So that's something I think we should always keep in mind, especially now, where we have the freedom to walk into a library, where we can go on and grab books from almost any and every source, are we? And we're going to look at some numbers later on that's going to make it important for you to do something. You know, it's easy for us, or it's easier for us to pick up and say, here is the story of those before. But now, what is our responsibility in this hour, especially in the 21st century? So we'll look at that shortly. But let's get into this. Now, there are 3 women we're going to highlight today. Now, from the historical content as well as present, I have a host of black authors, female authors I absolutely love. And as an author, these are women who I look at their writing styles, I look at the stories they tell, I look at how they tell the story, I look at the circumstances under which they're telling their story, and this is helping me to emulate some of those great women writers that I love. So I'm not going to cover them all today, of course. So we got many episodes, by God's permission, where we will get into this more. But for today, we're going to highlight 3 authors, and we're going to start with Phillis Wheatley. And the reason I'm starting here, and I think it's going to make sense, is Phillis Wheatley is the first black woman to be published, to have her poems published. So we're going to start with her. Now, again, as always, I have my notes with me so I don't forget anything and or am inaccurate with anything. And last week I told you I was going to drop some things. It took me a minute, but that information that I gave you in last week in the first episode is available in episode 1. So today, any information I give you, I will drop the links on how you can read more on it, and you'll see where I'm getting this information from in the stats. So if there's a question or you see something that's not correct in those numbers, please drop the comment. We want to be right and exact. So we're going to start with Phillis Wheatley. Now, Phillis Wheatley, who was born in 1713, and I apologize, 1753. She only lived to be 31 years old. She passed in 1784. But Phillis Wheatley was born in my studies show Gambia or Senegal, and was purchased here in America, and I'm using purchase in quotation marks, but she was purchased by the Wheatley family in Boston. And at the age of about 7 or 8, Phillis Wheatley was reading and writing. And not just reading and writing, but reading in English, Latin, Greek, and was very versed in her readings of the Bible. So by the age of 20, Phillis Wheatley wrote her first book called The Poems of Value. The Poems of Value, Religion, and Morals. And I'll again put that link below. Now check this out. At the age of 20, her writing. Now let me add this before we go. If you recall in episode 1, we talked about how the laws were set up to make sure that anyone black reading or writing would be fined, whipped, beaten to death, imprisoned. That's how important it was for the Caucasian to make sure that the black man and woman could not read and write, right? So this woman, at the age of 20, Phillis Wheatley, wrote her first book of poems. It was such a prolific writing that she was brought to court by white men who wanted her to prove her authorship because there was no way that a black woman wrote this. And of course, she proved it. And this was what was considered in American history to be the first um, black woman to publish a book of poetry. And her name is Phillis Wheatley. And again, now we can pick books of poems up everywhere. But she was the first one to have a published book of poems or poetry. So I thought that was very interesting to share with us today. Now, we're going to move on to the next person, and then I'm going to tie Phillis Wheatley and this next person together. Now, the second person I want to bring to us today, she comes about 30 years later. After the passing of Phillis Wheatley, Harriet Jacobs was born in 1813. Now, many of you may say Harriet Jacobs. You know her under her synonym of Linda Brent. Now, let's go into the story and we'll lead up to that. Harriet Jacob, unlike Phillis Wheatley, she was born in slavery. And like many black women at that time and for centuries later and centuries before, she was sexually abused brutally. And the abuse became at a certain point too much. So she decided to hide in an attic crawl space. And she was in that crawl space for 7 years in this crawl space. Eventually, utilizing the Underground Railroad, she made her way to New York with her children. And that's when she wanted to tell the story while in New York. And let me also add this, and this is great information for those of you in Michigan who may not know, but Idlewild, Michigan is known for being a place where many of the black greats lived. And I mean, you have many that lived there, especially in the early 30s and 40s, etc. Well, Harriet Jacobs moved in with, and I want to get the name right for you. She moved in with a family there. And while living there, I'm gonna get it. No, I'm not. I'll drop it below. I forgot. Oh, Nathaniel Parker Willis. Thank you. Nathaniel Parker Willis. She moved in with the Willis family, who also were into writing. And that's when she started telling her story in writing. And she went under the name Linda Brent. Check this. You ready? She wrote Incidents of a Slave Girl. Incidents of a Slave Girl. If you have not picked up that book, you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay? Incidents of a Slave Girl goes into the brutality, sexually, mentally, emotionally, physically, of slaves on the plantation, specifically the women. And she also in that story addresses how white women, specifically northern women, were ignoring what was taking place amongst the slave women. And that although, because remember at this time, you had a lot of them who could proclaim they were against slavery and the abuse of it, but really were just turning their eye to it. So she addressed that in the Incidents of a Slave Girl. I read this book over 30 years ago, and I make it part of my regular reading to never forget. Now I want to tie Phillis Wheatley to Harriet Jacobs one more time. These were women who were being sexually abused, mentally, emotionally, physically, misused, abused, and weren't even considered human. They were property of, right? in spite of those hurdles, those walls, those barriers they put up, these women told their stories. And their story was one that the rest of the world wasn't ready for. They wasn't ready to hear or see a black woman write in that kind of clarity and in telling her story, her poems in such a way. There's no way this could have came from a black woman. And then for incidents of a slave girl, she was born just 30 years later, and she told her story and gave great details of her story. And she addressed who was ignoring her of these stories. Not just hers, but many of the stories going on, or the countless numbers of stories going on that were being ignored. That was a brave thing to do. And this is in the 1800s. And again, as we addressed in episode 1, and if you didn't check it out, please do. That's where we list the laws by several states that were placed to make sure black men and women weren't reading and writing. So this is how much they would fight to their death to tell the story that you and I today can pick up and read of what took place in those times, right? And in many cases still going on today. So it gives you that comparison or comparative, gives you that. So she told her story. She made sure the world knew, and she did it without any holdback, if you will. I'm sure it was some. She probably didn't tell us the whole thing, but we got the gist of it. And her name is Harriet Jacobs, and she was the first black woman to publish a autobiography. The first black woman to publish an autobiography. So we salute and stand proud of the works of both Phillis Wheatley and Harriet Jacobs. On that, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. And now, I want to go into the third person. Now, of course, due to time, there's only so much we could cover in one day. There's so many more stories we're going to tell and go into more depth with. But these were the three I wanted to highlight. So we're going to bring it a little more to the modern day. And this is someone whose books I have behind me. And I don't know if you can see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books by this female author behind me. Her books are one I can say as an author, I emulate the most. And what I love about her style of writing is the simplicity, but yet how in depth her writings go. And I'm speaking of none other than our very own Sister Dr. Student Minister Ava Muhammad. May Allah be forever pleased with her and with all these women. Sister Ava, who is a brilliant attorney, student minister, she was a student minister here in the Nation of Islam, being the first woman to be placed over not just a mosque, but a region. And she broke barriers as a powerful minister in not just the teachings of the Nation of Islam, but let's look at this as a religion in total. In Islam, to date, we still suffer from classism, racism, sexism. There are those who still have very archaic ideas when it comes to women, specifically black women. And there are many who sadly, in one of the most beautiful of faiths in the world, there's still those who still want to hold you back, if you will. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, seeing her level of study, and he called her a star. And seeing this star and all that she does and was doing placed her over the Atlanta Mosque and over the southern region. And this right here was something that the world of Islam never seen, heard of, or have done since. She was the first to do it. And as we talk about great women like Phillis Wheatley and like Harriet Jacobs, who dared to stand alone and to stand out and to do what was never heard of at that time, Sister Dr. Student Minister Ava Muhammad stands amongst those, because what she did in religion is unheard of. Not just Islam, but check out Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and we can go on and on. But for a woman to stand, a black woman to stand out and to run and have under her leadership, such was never heard of and done before or since. Now, we did lose our beautiful sister in 2022. And I did have the honor of meeting her, talking to her, securing her in many arenas. She will be one who is truly missed, and I'm grateful that I get to read her writings, and there's more. These were just what I have. There's more you can find on YouTube, and check Amazon, and I believe her website as well, and I'll drop that link as well. But she's one who, as an author, I follow her and emulate her in so many of her writings. And I appreciate and I'm grateful for what she has done, because she broke barriers where there were walls that others did not dare to cross. She did. And her writings go in depth from a spiritual standpoint of exactly who and what we are as women, from naturally beautiful, queen of the planet Earth, real love, elevated places. I mean, she covers it. And the other thing, not just for women, her writings are so profound. I've heard men quoting from her as well. Universal truth, right? It has no barrier. No different than reading incidents of a slave girl or the poems of various subjects, religions, and morals. See, when you understand divine truth, when you understand universal truth, it doesn't matter who the author, because you recognize the truth being shared with you, and you can stand on the knowledge and wisdom that you will gain from that truth. So I wanted to include in our list today, not just from the historical, but bring it to present day, because these were three women who, despite their time, despite their walls that were put up by society, they knocked them down and did them in a way that was so profound that we can stand here today in 2026 enjoying those writings and learning greatly and deeply from them. So again, to recap, we had Phillis Wheatley, the first black woman to publish poems in the United States of America. We have Harriet Jacobs, who wrote the first black female autobiography in the United States, Incidents of a Slave Girl. And then lastly, Sister Dr. Student Minister Ava Muhammad, who has a list of great books, but she was the first black woman to stand up and run and be in the leadership role of a mosque and over a region in the studies of Islam. So those were the three that we were covering today. And before the time get away from us, I wanted to give you some stats. Now this go back to what we discussed earlier about what our role is in all of this. Because where and why this is so important, chapters and culture. As an author, I know how the ups and downs of this thing go. I have 11 published works. And having these works, I mean, it's a hustle to get the book sales and to get out there and get your name out, especially as an indie author. I'm self-published. I'm not one who's in a publishing house. And there's more work to that because you're the one who have to get the books out there and your story told. But here is and I would say sad, the sad reality to this. There are not enough of us telling our story. So with that said, I wanted to give some numbers. I wanted to give us some stats. And I'm going to, again, I will list this information below. But I was reading an article in Rise to Write. Rise to Write, and I'll put that link below as well. And they did an excellent article. It's entitled, Why Only 6% of Authors Are Black and Why Black Voices Matter in Publishing. And again, I'll have the link below for you. But this is something they shared. Only 6% of published authors in the United States are black. In children's literature, just 12% of books feature black characters, which means that when your children are picking up books, they don't get to see themselves. Part of children's imagination and creativity and ability to grow and think on other levels is the ability to what they see and they take in. But if they're picking up books and they're not even seeing their own faces, that's a barrier, a hurdle. That's a wall placed in front of them, right? So in children's literature, just 12% of books feature black characters or are written by black authors. Black authors make up less than 2% of the New York Times bestsellers list. So that means 98% is somebody else. Only 2% are black authors. Those are ridiculous. Now this is stats from 2024. I'm sure 2025 we didn't do no huge leap and bounds, so we're gonna go with these numbers roughly still today. Okay, y'all ready for this one? I didn't know this. This was very interesting. Of the 100 Amazon bestsellers in 2024, 5 were written by black authors. Of 100, 5 were written by black authors. Across global publishing, so you may say, well, Fatima, that's just the United States. Okay. Across global publishing, less than 1% of children's books features black protagonists. Less than one. Less than one. So we don't even get the one. The publishing industry remains 74% white in staffing and leaderships. So if you as a black author are trying to show a major publishing company where our stories matter and they can't even relate because this is not their story, you'll see why it's so difficult for black authors to get accepted into larger publishing companies, right? Now, when you hear these numbers, and I wanted to make sure I covered everything I wanted to share. Yeah. So when you hear these numbers, not only should you recognize there's not enough representation by black authors and publishers in this industry. This is a huge industry. Let me give you another number I thought was very interesting. In the United States, and these are stats I believe also from 2024, but I'll list it down. This was by Zippia, Zippia. Only 7,591 authors are currently employed, black authors are currently employed in the United States of America. 7,591. There are 30 to 40 million black people in the United States, and only 7,000 are black authors. Let me tell you another stat I thought was interesting. The most common ethnicity of authors, 75.6% are white, 7.6 are Hispanic or Latino, 5% is black, and then the other 5% is unknown. So I don't know if they either didn't identify themselves or they make up other ethnicities. And again, we're only going based on what this say, but 5% in the whole United States. And we tied with others. I don't even know who others are, but the others and us are the same number. We are not being represented. Our story is not being told. So whenever someone asks me, how did you know to tell your story? We all have a story to tell. We all have something we have gone through that someone else could benefit from your learning, regardless what it is, from something in depth, from sexual abuse or imprisonment, to your filling out college exams, or your story of being on basketball, or your fictional story with black children as characters. We have a story to tell. So if you are one who have been saying, I want to write a book, I want to tell my story, do it. Do it. Do it. It's not as difficult. And if you need help and you got questions, drop a link below. We know black publishers and other authors who would love to reach out and offer assistance to you. But we got to take advantage of telling our story. These were women, just two examples, and there are many, many others who died to learn to read and write. They died. They faced imprisonment. They faced beatings and fines to write a story. We don't have to do all of that today. There's still some hurdles. We still got some backlash, but we can get our story out, and your story must be told. So, chapters and culture, that's what we're doing. We're going to talk about our black voices from our black authors through the black literature that tells our black stories. I, again, thank you for joining us. And we're here every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Eastern, live. And then you, of course, can catch the replay, subscribe, like, and again, I thank you for joining us, and you have a great day on purpose. Peace.